Welcome everyone to What the Fiction, and welcome to our new segment, Creators Corner. And joining me is Laura Kirwan-Ashman, who is the writer and director of Sourhall, the original Audible audio drama, which is out this week.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. We've known each other now for, like over a year. And
yeah,
a year and a half. And I enjoy talking to you so much, especially about fiction and Femme Gaze and the creation of fiction and like why it works. And so you're like one of my go-to people that I'm like, I've just watched this. Isn't it cool? Let's talk about it. Or have you checked out that? And then actually getting to enjoy something that you have created has been just an absolute pleasure. So thank you for looping me into the PR cycle so that I could interview you officially and actually get a chance to talk to you about this very, I don't know, it's fascinating because horror is not something that I normally check out because I'm kind of a wuss.
I don't know how I ended up writing a horror, especially as this is my first ever sort of series commission. So this is my first thing that I've been paid to write that's actually been made into a real thing that is about to go out into the world for people to experience. And yeah, if you would have asked me like a year ago what my first project would be, I would not have said an audio horror. But that's just how things go.
An audio horror featuring two lesbians seeking an idyllic farm life.
Yeah. yeah. My city girl ass did not really see that coming. But yeah, it's been a challenge, but it's been a really good one.
So Sourhall originally is based on a short story by Naomi Booth, which appeared in an anthology called Hag, and it took sort of a feminist approach to folklore. And this story in and of itself featured these two, George and Ash, who move away kind of from their trauma, but their trauma follows them and they end up having to deal with a boggart. And so can you talk a little bit about like the challenges of adapting a short story to this long format?
Yeah. So, I mean, the short story when it was sent to me, just like as a Word document, was like 18 A4 pages.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, so, we're thinking like 6 half-hour episodes, so like 3 hours. I was like, oh my God, like that's, like kind of almost, 2 feature films worth of writing. So yeah, I mean, the kind of main thing that I had to do was basically just making more of it. I mean, I think pretty much everything that's in the original story is in the audio series. It was just more a case of sort of looking deeper into everything. So because I knew I had to generate more content, it was a case of like, okay, doing a deep dive on the characters, basically figuring out like their background and what I imagined their, other than what was like on the page, their personality types, their traumas, their past experiences, their family, basically everything that they bring with them to the point where you first meet them in the story. So yeah, it was a case of doing a really deep dive on that stuff, and then just sort of letting the characters guide you through what was already in the short story, and then just sort of blowing that out. So there's basically like things that appear in the short story that would be like a line or two or a paragraph, I turned into like full scenes and sequences. And so yeah, it was mostly just the case of just making more of everything. But yeah, I mean, all the sort of like core themes and what the story is about at the heart of it was in the original story. So I don't think I sort of changed much or added much on that front. But yeah, it was just sort of like adding nuance and layers and depth to it.
And so we have these two women who have sort of had their own baggage. I'm just gonna call it baggage for now because there's a lot going on in the audio drama, and I don't want to spoil too much. But the setup is, Ash has had a traumatic relationship in the past and ended up pregnant and had a miscarriage, and George had some family issues from originally being on the farm that she sort of just suppressed. And kind of through magical means in some way, everything is pulling these two to this farm. Partly their love of each other is pulling them to the farm because they don't want to be apart from each other. But maybe it wasn't a good idea for them to be together based on everything going on. But in the end, we kind of are proven wrong by all of these assumptions, which I love so much.
Good.
Oh my God. Okay. So,
I mean, I've been sort of speaking with you sort of since the sort of genesis of this idea or this like opportunity came along because you're one of my go-to people, especially when it comes to sort of folklore and mythological storytelling and just figuring out like what things mean and how to sort of draw that out within the stories that I want to create as well. So yeah, it's been delightful to talk to you along the way and be like, does this work? And does this mean this? And
yeah. And especially with sort of like the aspects of the shadow that we carry around and inherited trauma, right? So especially for George, she deals through, and maybe I should say up front, there is several content warnings / trigger warnings in this drama, like up front. Pregnancy, miscarriage, abuse, sexual abuse. Just in general, like creepy farm guys that stand too close to you.
Yeah.
That bothered me a little bit. Like I got anxious while listening to it. I did actually jump and squeak at one moment listening to it because it's very intense. Because if you listen to it with the headphones, you get like the full experience, and we'll get into directing it in a second. But
yeah, sure.
Why was the like folklore aspects so, I don't know, relevant to this, like to this story? There's a supernatural creature basically influencing this, a boggart. Mm-hmm. Why did this tie in so well for you?
So I think this is really interesting. So basically, when the series comes out, I've also been recording these conversations with sort of different experts and just interesting people about sort of different issues and themes within Sourhall. And one of the people I spoke to was a folklore professor who was sort of a big part of the original Hag anthology and was sort of a consultant on that for the authors. So she worked with Naomi Booth on the original story. So I got to talk to her about boggarts and just about sort of folklore from the north of England, which is Yorkshire, where the story is set. And we were sort of the interesting thing that we talked about, and I think that I sort of really tapped into with my adaptation of it, and it's there in the original story as well, is basically just how supernatural creatures in sort of folklore and mythological storytelling are often, stand-ins for mental health in a lot of ways. And especially, you know, obviously way back in the day when people were sort of telling these sort of stories and no one really knew what mental health was. And sort of, you know, the effects of trauma and sort of baggage and the subconscious and all these kind of things that, you know, have always been there and have always affected humans on a very deep level. And so I think that sort of supernatural creatures and strange things happening were often sort of ways that sort of people used to kind of explain strange behavior, strange things happening.
Yeah, they're possessed by a ghost. They are haunted. They're a witch. You know, they're all of these things that, or there's a monster that's torturing them.
And it was also really interesting that the professor sort of told me that with sort of like domestic spirits like boggarts, which usually attach themselves to dwellings, they're very much associated with farms and sort of rural life. A lot of that can kind of be traced to just the uncertainty of farming and how much you are kind of at the mercy of the elements, and there's so much sort of up in the air, and your entire livelihood is like depends on whether the harvest is going to be good, whether like the ground is going to be too hard, is it going to be too cold, is it going to be too hot. There's so much sort of anxiety and uncertainty in that kind of lifestyle. And I think a lot of these creatures kind of come in to explain just that sort of like feeling of superstitiousness, where it's like if there's they would basically like say that a creature lived like on the farm and you had to be nice to it, otherwise it would ruin your crops. So it's this kind of like element of luck and anxiety and uncertainty that kind of allows these kind of supernatural creatures and folklores to kind of creep in to the psychology of the people who are kind of living in that world.
Yeah, and that also comes like from mythology in general. Like, we used the gods to explain why things happen, and these supernatural creatures came about as a way to kind of explain and blame, right? Yeah. Explain and blame these things, right? And then also they end up becoming in our fiction a lens by which we can personify the baggage and the shadow that we carry with us from things that we have experienced in our life that we have no control over. These things happen to us, and it's a way for us to deal with them in the fiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So obviously I think the boggart is interesting. So the genesis of this particular story is based on a Yorkshire folklore tale called Were Flettin. And Flettin basically means like fleeing. And the sort of very basic overview of the story is that there's a farmer and his family who are kind of tormented by a boggart that is just messing up everything on the farm, you know, fucking with all their supplies and, you know, messing with their cheese and, you know, just generally making life incredibly difficult. So they decide to pack up all their things and move away to another farm. So they're sort of in their cart going down the road, all their belongings are in the back, and they run into a neighbor. He goes, "Oh, are you leaving the farm?" And a voice from the butter churn in their belongings says, "I were flitting." And so the farmer and his family basically realizes that the boggart has come with them. And so
in the butter churn.
The moral of the story is that you can't escape the boggarts. You have to learn to live with it. So they end up going back to the farm because it's better to live somewhere where they know with a boggart than move somewhere else and have a boggart. And it also speaks to this kind of very kind of practical, like it or lump it kind of Yorkshire attitude. Yeah. There's nothing you can do about it. You just have to learn to live with it. It's just sort of part of life, which is, you know, obviously a metaphor for so many things in life. It's, you know, it's sort of recognizing that things in life are unpredictable and there are elements at play that you have no control over. So yeah, that's sort of the original version of the folklore that Naomi Booth sort of took, and then I took Naomi's version, and so it's been an interesting sort of 3-stage
You have experienced like a real transformational adaptation of a folklore to a short story to like a full audio drama, which is so beautifully executed. And you yourself got to go there, go to the farm, and direct this.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I mean, Audible were amazing, and I didn't expect it at all. They were just like, do you want to direct it? And I was like, are you sure? Like, I've never, obviously I want to be a writer director for the screen. That's my, my goal, but I've made a few documentaries, but I've never directed a piece of fiction. So I haven't worked with actors before. So yeah, it was a really wonderful sort of, they put their faith in me basically. And it was just like a really amazing experience and sort of introduction to working with actors because it's audio, you're not having to worry about any of the visuals. There's no cameras, there's no setups, there's no sort of blocking out scenes in the same way. And my job was literally just to work with the actors on their performances. And it was a really sort of like low key, low stakes in terms of just the scale of it. It was just very small and intimate and sort of not as stressful as like a film shoot would be. So yeah, it was an incredible experience. And yeah, we were very lucky in that they decided they wanted to record on location, which is like
so rare.
It just doesn't happen with audio. Like the vast majority of audio is recorded in studios for obvious reasons, and then sort of everything is added in as sort of special effects. And but I think with this piece, they really wanted to kind of do everything they could to make it as sort of immersive and atmospheric. I think especially because it is a horror piece. So that's why they wanted to record on location, and also that's why they used the sort of 360 binaural sound technology, which is so cool. It's basically like a dummy head, and they designed it by using like thousands of measurements of human heads to figure out like the average human head. So it's like made to measure like that. And then it has these like ears. You might have seen, if people watch like ASMR videos, there are these microphones that look like they're like sort of like silicone ears. They literally look like human ears. So they're like that, and they're on the side of the dummy head. So basically it filters sound and processes sound and records sound exactly the way that the human head and the human ear does. So that's why you can hear it, like if the actor is walking around the head or coming close or moving away or coming from specific directions, you hear all of that. So it feels like you're right there, basically, which is really good for horror, and really good for audio, because you don't have the luxury of visuals as a stimulus. It's all about the audio. So yeah, that was really cool. And the guy who did the Andy, the guy who did the boggart voice,
oh my god,
is so scary.
Well, and also at one point I think I leaned over to my husband and I was like, they're making out on top of me. Because like George and Asher and are like, they love each other and they express their love very physically, but like you literally hear it, like you're like in it. It's very intense.
Fun fact, when you record audio kissing, it's never actual kissing, because actual kissing sounds disgusting.
Yeah.
So it's just kissing the back of their hands.
Oh, now you've ruined the illusion for no.
Also, we were recording in the middle of a pandemic. So.
Yes, that's true. I know, but it sounds so real and visceral, and like the highs of the passion between the two characters are so palpable, and then also like the lows and the fear and the like everything is just so real. Like. It was really well done, Laura. I'm so impressed.
I mean, I can't really take credit. I can take credit for the writing of it. But I think the recording was like, all the actors were just incredible. And I think they were all really excited to be there because, like I said, we recorded this in October. So by that time, nearly all of them had been, shut up at home. If they were doing voice stuff, it was like in their closet under a duvet. Like everyone was just so excited to be like out in the world and like in the countryside on this farm in like the middle of Yorkshire, which is beautiful. And it sort of felt like being at like summer camp. Like we were all staying in these sort of joined up cottages, and everyone was just like really excited to be there and also excited to record audio on location because no one had done it before. And it was just a lovely experience. Everyone was amazing. I barely had to do anything in terms of direction. And then the editing, the team at Naked Productions who Tony and Eloise, who recorded it all and then mixed it all. They're just insane. They're so good. They're so good at their jobs. It was a joy. I was very, very lucky.
That's awesome. So, we've talked a little bit about the aspects of horror, but this horror is primarily based in personal horror. So it's like all stuff that you're dredging from the past and has come back in some way because you've ignored it to attack you in the form of like the boggart manifesting these fears and these experiences of the past, because like that's sort of what ends up happening with especially Ash, is that she sort of relives things. We see it a little bit more with George, but it's more like referred to, I think, in the story. But Ash herself actually relives different aspects of the trauma that she has gone through. Why is that? Like, I don't know. Why did it work? Like, because like it's horrifying to experience, but then it sets you up so well for how the ending works too.
Yeah. Well, I think basically it's the boggart is basically used as a metaphor for unresolved trauma. So it's a creature that exists in and of itself, and it sort of haunted George's father before her. But the way that the sort of role that it plays within the story and the device that it's used as is as a way to force these characters to confront their trauma in order to sort of begin the path towards healing. And obviously everything is sort of more extreme because it's horror, and I'm not saying that everyone has to like relive their trauma in order to heal from it or to face it. But it is a metaphor, and it comes down to this sort of notion of naming things, which is very kind of important, especially I think in sort of folklores and mythological storytelling, and when there are creatures, and which ties into sort of psychologically, when you sort of name something, it's a way of exerting sort of control and ownership over it. And it speaks to the fact that you cannot begin to deal with something until you name it, and i.e. you acknowledge what it is, what the thing is, and you accept that is the problem. That's the process of therapy, is like you figure out what the trauma is or what the issue is, and only once you can do that, then you can start to deal with it and take ownership of it and have it exert less control over your life and develop coping mechanisms.
In therapy you find what is going on and you fully recognize it, and then you're able to actually put it in its right place psychologically in reference to everything else that has happened to you, right? And so you're able to actually like, to your point, the naming aspect of it is an ownership of that shadow and that baggage and that trauma, and the ability for you to be able to put it in relation to your own life rather than ignoring it.
Yeah, and also take away some of its power, or more specifically, reclaim that power for yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
because with these aspects, you're always expending power to ignore them. Right. So that's where that's like the power doesn't come from anywhere. You're always expending power, whether you want to or not, just like the farmer who's trying to escape. Right. You're always doing that. And so, yeah, that's wonderful. I love it.
And it's also kind of very much an on the nose sort of metaphor for, I guess, the Robert Bly approach to baggage, where you sort of, you name it, you see it, you accept it, and then you like integrate it. Mm-hmm. So the ending of Sourhall is very much a kind of metaphor for them naming and welcoming and integrating, the things that they've been suppressing, and integrating that into their family and choosing to love it, basically, so that they can all heal.
Yeah, so, like they end up choosing to love the darkest parts of themselves in some ways, but it's the fact that they're willing to face it together that is sort of in some ways such a transcendent ending that I'm just not used to seeing in story. And, oh God, it was awesome.
Yeah, that was something that I really wanted to do. I think sort of because of when this project sort of came to me, it was around the time that I started working on this mythological fantasy TV series idea that we've talked about a lot, that you know about, which sort of came as a result of sort of becoming a Star Wars fan and getting into all this sort of mythological storytelling, and my frustrations with sort of storytelling trends that were really annoying me. And so all this stuff had kind of been in marinating in my head for a while, and resulted in this fantasy series. And also it was sort of around the time that I discovered the term hope punk, which I think really helped me kind of solidify my personal sort of ideology when it comes to like storytelling and the kind of stories that I wanted to put out in the world. And then obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic, like everything was terrible. So I was very much like, I only want to put good things out into the world that are full of hope and leave people feeling good and like, just hopeful, and that, exalt in the powers of empathy and compassion and love and togetherness and all those, things that sound very sloppy, but are, some of the most powerful forces in the universe and, definitely within storytelling. So I think when this project came to me, as I said, it was not what I would have imagined. Like, horror is not particularly my wheelhouse. And it was not, a project that came directly from me. It was an adaptation. It was audio, whereas I've been focusing on visual storytelling. But I think what I decided from the very beginning was like, okay, how can I make this horror and these two characters go through so much? And it really is really dark, and it is, really difficult, and the characters are put through hell in a lot of ways. But how can I still make this feel hope punk? How can I give this a surprising, really sort of Fem Gaze ending that hopefully, makes all the darkness, worth it, or meaningful, not just gratuitous, not just torturing these women for the sake of it,
like if this was a Hollywood story, you would expect them, and I mean this with complete shade right now, that if this was a Hollywood story, you would expect one of them to have given up on their dreams. So either they lost the farm, or they lost their opportunities to say explore having a family, or they would have separated, or, and they would have been like, you would have had like some sort of like after scene where they're like, going on like ashes in the city and George is like in an insane asylum. Like I just
Yeah.
Like I it was so good. Like, I'm so proud of you. It's so good.
Oh,
I just, like, I want to gush about it more, but I think that experiencing it, if you are okay, of course, with all of the triggers and all of the content warnings that we have already mentioned, it is very powerful, and you get it. I love that you get this, that people need to be like, hey, I can make it past what I've experienced as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's important. And also just to note that if you do listen to it, there are sort of general trigger warnings at the beginning of this series, and then I think within the sort of Audible app, if you click on details for each episode, it tells you like detailed trigger warnings for each episode as well. So that was something that I was like very insistent about, because as I said, I try to be very intentional about what I put out into the world, and I never want to sort of traumatize people or be careless with not preparing people enough, or not forewarning. So that was important to me. I never want to hurt people if I can avoid it.
Yeah. Each episode is like is very intense. It has its own, kind of like, I don't know, wave to it of intensity, and it always ends up leaving you on this like very unsure footing. So you're like, I gotta click the next one because I gotta find out if they're gonna be okay. Yeah. It's just so wonderful. But why was telling this? I mean, the original story was from a feminist folklore anthology, but why was it important to you to sort of view this as a Fem Gaze first, in some ways, work of fiction?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with that's just how I approach storytelling in general. Just because of my personal identity, but also I've sort of made very conscious decisions to kind of approach storytelling always from a place of emotion and empathy and humanity and relationships, first and foremost. And also I think, it goes back to the fact that because I'm not a horror expert, I sort of didn't have that kind of backlog of references or experience or like personal passion for horror. So I just sort of went to what I know and what I personally believe in and what comes naturally to me. So I think that was my way into the story. But also like the original Naomi Booth story is very Fem Gaze in its sort of the way that it's written. It's very much you're inside Ash's psyche and her emotions, and everything is sort of stemming from that. And because the sort of core themes are trauma and how the boggart manifests as trauma, so it was always a story that was like first and foremost rooted in the characters, their internal worlds, their psyches, their emotions, their relationships. And then it's sort of like the horror element and the folklore element and everything else was sort of layered on top of that and sort of born out of that. So I think I was just sort of following what was already there, following my own natural instincts and my own personal storytelling ideology. And also I just wanted to I wanted to do something that felt subversive and surprising within the sort of genre tropes for not just horror, but also just saying whenever any queer female characters are in a story, one of them, there's usually some sort of tragedy. One of them usually dies, especially if, and then it's like if one of them is black. I was just like, I want to write, an interracial lesbian couple in a horror story where neither of them die and it's actually a happy ending because like I've never seen that before, and I think that that's the story that I want to tell, and that's something interesting and new and fresh that I think people would enjoy. And just judging from all the conversations that we have and the conversations that take place on Twitter amongst sort of feminine fiction lovers who talk very loudly every day about the things that they're sick of, the things they want to see more of, and all of those things, you know, are things that I agree with. And that's what I try and do with my storytelling. It's just, I know that people want it and are craving it and it's been missing for so long. So I'm like, if I one small morsel, then that's
I like one of my friends always says, I ship this character in happiness. You know, I absolutely love that George and Ash, like, they also get to ship with happiness together.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
it's important to me.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. So where can people find it if they're looking to check out Sourhall, the Audible original? It's on Audible.
There you go. Yeah, so it's basically available on Audible from Monday, 25th of January. Basically, one episode drops every day. It's available if you want to do the free trial, or if it's free if you already have an Audible subscription, or I think you can do like a one-off payment if you don't want to sign up for Audible, but you just want this one story. So yeah, there's a variety of ways you can listen. But yeah, so yeah, it drops on Monday, and then, like I said, like
every day after?
Every day a new episode. And then there's also these accompanying sort of featurettes that I've been doing, which will be dropping on YouTube. There's 5 of them. So yeah, not one for every episode, but almost. But yeah, those are really interesting in terms of sort of digging deeper into the themes and speaking to just some like really fascinating, smart, funny, interesting people about it.
Like the folklorists and all these other people?
Yeah, folklore, we talk about Black motherhood, we talk about Femme Gaze storytelling, and then I'm going to be interviewing Pearl Mackie and Lucy Fallon, who play Ash and George as well.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome! Yeah. So is that going to be on like the Audible YouTube channel?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I imagine they will be sort of linked via the app. So I guess if you're listening to it, it'll probably tell you about it as well.
Okay. Well, so once you tweet about them, I'll retweet them on like everything, so you can see that, and then I'll add them to the liner notes of this episode, so people can check those out as well as the link to the Audible original. It should be coming out the day this is released, so you have lots to look forward to. So just into some kind of fun Loris-specific stuff. What are you consuming right now? What are you doing? What are you into? Because we haven't really talked about like what you're consuming right now. It's been a while since we've had an opportunity to be like, hey, what are you checking out?
Yeah, I think I've sort of been, I've been a lot busier than I usually am. Usually all I'm doing is lying around watching stuff. But yeah, I mean, so I just finished watching Discovery of Witches, which
cool
watch, which I really enjoyed for how sort of unashamedly it leans into its sort of tropes as being just, you know, first and foremost sort of a romance, but then also, you know, fantasy. It has witches, vampires, demons. It does some really interesting stuff with the sort of lore around those creatures within this specific world and the sort of different rules and, you know, all that kind of jazz. So yeah, I thought it was good. I think it struggles with a bit of sort of, it basically assumes that you've read the books. And it doesn't really explain anything. So it was interesting for me. My friend who told me to watch it is like has been reading the books, so I would be like, okay, so like this just happened, but I don't really understand, and then she would explain it because she's read all the books, and I'm like, all of that stuff is so fascinating and so cool.
Why isn't it in the
show? It was really frustrating at times. But the two, the couple are very hot and sort of that you like their relationship is good.
Good.
Very sort of like feral vampire, you know, and all-powerful witch. It's great. I wish it was hornier as well. It's like the first season is like quite horny and very, very romantic, and then sort of the second season it becomes very sort of plot heavy, and I was like, I want more. But I think I was also like spoiled by watching like Bridgerton.
Yeah. Everybody watching Bridgerton was like, why isn't everything this horny?
Why isn't everything this horny? Like, that's all we want with simple creatures. 2021 is just like, all we want is just like unashamed romance and horniness.
Escapism. Like, let's just do it.
So yeah, I've been watching that, and then I've been watching stuff for some meetings that I have coming up, which is fun because it's all sort of like fairy tale, folklore-y stuff. So I've just started watching Once Upon a Time, and then I've also have started rewatching Good Omens, which I loved so much when it came out, and I sort of saw a fic recommendation, and I was like, oh, I've never read any Good Omens fics, so I started reading this one fic, and it's so good, and I was just like, okay, I need to rewatch Good Omens again. But luckily, it's relevant to the sort of general research of stuff that I'm watching at the moment. So yeah, it's all sort of very fairy tale-y, folklore-y, magical fantasy stuff that I'm watching. But then I think to temper that, I've also started rewatching Hannibal for the fourth time in
oh my god. Like, I saw all the movies.
I miss them every day.
I saw all the movies when I was younger, but I've never actually checked out the show. Like, I really I know I probably need to.
You have to.
It's just a little awkward because it's not something I can watch with my kids. So it's harder to like be like, I'm going to sit down and watch Hannibal.
Yeah.
You know, either just with my husband or like just on my own. And that's like, just let me watch my cannibal show.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely kind of watch it with the kids. But I feel like it ticks so much of your boxes.
Ooh.
In terms of, I don't know, it's just like it's a ridiculous show in a lot of ways, but it just like absolutely owns how pretentious it is in terms of like the dialogue and how people speak. Like, it's so flowery, it's so sort of stylized.
I love it when there's good prose in people's conversations. Like, it's just
it's basically, it's like not really about cannibalism. It's not even really about the crime that it's sort of couched in. It's just about these two incredible minds who basically their minds fall in love with each other. And all of that is through sort of subtextual dialogue and just like longing and pining and yearning. And they're basically soulmates, but it's all just under the surface, and it's just delicious. It's so well written. And yeah, it's all very sort of like metaphorical and, I don't know, psychological, and yeah, it's I love it so much. My fourth rewatch.
I will try to watch it this year. It'll be on my list to get it done.
It instantly became one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and
it's a solid rec. All of Laura's recs are always solid. So.
I mean, I do watch some trash as well. So. It's
I mean, sometimes trash is good, right? Because it's just, you know.
But amazing is one of my favorite genres. It's, it's a hard thing to do, and it usually happens by accident. No one sets out to make something shit. Yeah. But amazing, but it happens, and when it's good, it's really good.
Yeah. So what are you working on that you can share with us, I suppose?
Well, yeah, now the Sourhall is my first baby is born. I'm going back to work on my feature film, which has sort of been on pause for most of last year, because I've been focusing on Sourhall. So the feature film is sort of a coming of age film about young Black women in London who are part of a all-girl double Dutch team, and it's sort of about a young Black woman who's an artist and sort of her finding identity in belonging and Black female sisterhood. And there's sort of a queer awakening love story, slightly enemies to lovers-ish.
Rivals to lovers?
Not really rival. It's more just like the sort of classic, I hate you, you're really annoying, but then we fall in love.
Okay.
It's classic rom-com, basically. But yeah, so that's my
hate to love.
Feature. Yeah.
It's satisfying in and of itself, right? Figuring out how to come over like hate that you have for another person or misunderstanding.
Yeah, and it's all because they are basically like your shadow self.
Yeah.
And you have to...
Yeah, we've talked about this before offline.
So it's like all my favorite things, basically. Like Double Dutch for me is like the sort of visual epitome of like Black girl magic and joy. And yeah, I just wanted my debut feature to kind of basically speak to the person that I am, but also the kind of storytelling that I believe in. So it's very much, it's about Blackness and queerness and Femme Gaze, but it's happy. Basically, it's full of light and life and joy. It's not to say...
And it's not about like the trauma of being Black, right?
Yeah. It's not trauma porn. It's not sort of the suffering and hardships in it are not tied directly to Blackness or queerness or being a woman. And it's just fun basically. So that's in development at the moment with the British Film Institute here in the UK. I need to get back to basically doing the...
I was briefly part of a Double Dutch team in elementary school.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, skipping. Yeah. We had like a skip team. I don't know. It was a thing when I was younger. More people skipped. Like it was like you either worked on your individual or on Double Dutch, like skipping. I don't know.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing because the film sort of touches on this. Double Dutch is obviously kind of big in America, so it was born out of the sort of late 70s, early 80s hip hop scene in New York specifically, and then sort of spread from there. And it was, part of the sort of original pillars of hip hop. So it was like MCing, breakdancing, rapping, and then a bunch of others that my brain is failing me right now. But Double Dutch was one of them. But it's kind of the one was like quickly forgotten. And I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that it was the only sort of very specifically female-centric one.
Oh, yeah.
It's sort of like masculine world, which the early days of hip-hop absolutely were, and in many ways still are.
And breakdancing, too, because of like the physicality and everything like that. Like there's a lot of focus on breakdancing being masculine.
Very, very masculine, yeah. But it is such a beautiful sport and sort of pastime, because it's just like, the thing I love about it is that all you need is a flat surface and two pieces of rope. Like and the stuff that you can do within those very simple, very cheap, very sort of egalitarian, framework is insane. Like the stuff that people do now. And if you look up like sort of modern Double Dutch, there are like championships and stuff. And it also like weirdly was is still quite big in France, because I think when a lot of the hip hop groups first went over to France and Paris in particular, they would bring like Double Dutch teams with them to perform on stage. And for some reason France was like
it's almost because of the rhythm associated with it, it almost becomes dance like too, right? So
it's sort of like a perfect combination of like athleticism, dance. There's lots of like gymnastics and tumbling in it. So there's lots of like flips and somersaults and breakdancing stuff.
I had a good friend who could actually like cartwheel in and dance, and then a skip in double. Like it's impressive. I want to see this on screen, Laura. You have to get this. You have to get this done.
Yeah, I know,
And
I know. I need to get back to it. And yeah, so hopefully I think I've got like another draft and then a rewrite, and then we can start. We have a really cool list of sort of production companies and sales agents who are really excited to read it. So yeah, so we'll get it out to them hopefully in the next few months. And yeah, hopefully someone gives us a ton of money and we can make it.
yeah.
And then I have a few sort of TV stuff in the works that I can't really talk about.
Of course, no.
Yeah, hopefully
You're working on stuff, and I think that the hope I have is that we get to hear your voice out there in, written and even potentially directorial form out there sooner than later, and that you get an opportunity to really shine and show how much people are with you on your view of the world, which I am completely there.
I know you are my biggest cheerleader.
I'm just so glad I actually got to have you on something that I'm producing as a content creator, just to give a focus to your lens, because your way of looking at the world, how love and hope and all of these themes, and forgiving yourself too, right? Like that's one of the major kind of like themes of Sourhall, is like working through all of this, but then coming to terms and forgiving yourself so that you can move forward. I just love that you as a creator are out there in this world creating that vision.
Thanks, MC.
This has been such a fun conversation, Laura. So
good. I'm glad.
Thank you for joining me. We're very different time zones, so it's early for me. It's like, I don't know, later afternoon or early evening for you.
Yeah, it's like 5 p.m.
Yeah, we're figuring it out. But I love that I get to talk to you every single day. And I'm looking forward to everything that you put out, and I will be one of the people first in line whenever I can. So thank you so much, Laura, for coming on What the Fiction, talking all about your love of everything. And I look forward to having you back, maybe the next time that you're producing something super cool. But where can people find you in the meantime and see all of your amazing stuff?
So on Twitter, I am at Laura_K_A. On Instagram at LauraK_A. And you can see my work so far on my website, which is www.laurak-a.com.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, MC.
If you want to follow What the Fiction, you can check us out at Twitter at WT Force Media. We also have an Instagram at WT Force Media on Instagram. Or you can check out whattheforce.ca, where we also publish just audio-only versions of interviews and our deep dive discussions. What the Force is a big brand that covers media, meta, and mythic storytelling. So I hope that you check us out and check out everything involved in this. So cheers.